A young housemaid faced mistreatment and humiliation from the homeowners where she worked. Little did they know that if they had known her true story, they might have treated her differently. Lara, grappling with financial difficulties and health issues she couldn't afford to treat, held on to hope of one day studying and building a prosperous, happy life akin to what she had with her mother in the past. Often, good things come disguised as trials, and Lara was about to discover this. To achieve our deepest desires, we first need to demonstrate faith and resilience. With patience and courage to start anew, we can go much further. Lara, a 20-year-old, was left alone at 15. Her loving mother provided a comfortable life as best she could, but tragically died in a car accident, leaving Lara unsupported. Her mother never saved money, using it all to support Lara. Lara never knew her father, as her mother told her he died young, before she was born. With no close relatives, Lara was sent to an orphanage, where she could at least continue her studies and finish high school. Lara harbored no resentment, knowing her mother surely wished to leave her in a better situation but ran out of time. At 18, Lara found herself on her own. Informed she could no longer stay at the institution, she was referred to job interviews. She landed a job as a clerk in a household goods store, but the pay was low, barely covering rent for a small room she shared, plus food. Since her mother's death, Lara began experiencing discomfort in her right ear. She had pain, difficulty hearing from that side, and occasional dizziness. Unable to afford medical care, she ignored the issue to avoid notice. She began relying on lip reading and smiling warmly when that failed. Due to financial crisis, the household goods store closed, and Lara lost her job. With no savings and no new job prospects, she started to despair with nowhere to go. One day, passing by a beautiful house, she saw a sign on the gate seeking a live-in housemaid. The position seemed perfect. She could live at work and perhaps save for future studies. Her and her mother's dream. With her resume in hand, Lara rang the doorbell and was greeted by an elegantly dressed woman, later identified as Fatima, the housekeeper. Fatima, a 50-year-old with some disillusionment in life, took pity on the young, slender girl practically begging for the job. Thinking that if she didn't hire Lara, she might end up on the streets, Fatima made an unusual decision. She offered her the job, despite Lara's lack of experience as a maid. Lara moved into the house and was taken to a tiny, windowless room that clearly had been a converted closet for the maid. The space only fit a small bed, seemingly meant for a child, and a very old trunk. Fatima was visibly embarrassed showing the place, explaining that unfortunately, it was the only available room since the former maid's quarters had been turned into a room for Mr. Bolinas. Noticing Lara's confusion, Fatima explained that Mr. Bolinas was Daniela's cat, the daughter of the homeowners. Daniela was the same age as Lara but behaved like a spoiled child, likely due to parents who always indulged her every whim. When Olga, the previous maid, had to leave suddenly due to a family emergency, Daniela took over the room to fill it with cat toys. Thus, Lara had to settle for the old cleaning supplies closet turned bedroom. Despite the cramped, poorly ventilated space, Lara was grateful for the opportunity to have a room of her own, something she hadn't had in many years. She promised to clean thoroughly and do her best to make the space more pleasant. Fatima, seeing Lara's desperation, understood she had made the right choice in hiring her. Lara was clearly willing to accept any conditions to keep the job. The housekeeper promised herself that she would help Lara stay in that job. Lara put on the maid's uniform, an old piece left by Olga, and had to adjust the apron to hide how loose the clothes were on her. Then, she was introduced to Claudia, the homeowner, an elegant woman around 50 who always seemed to scrutinize the staff. Claudia made it clear to Lara the house rules. The young woman had to be available all day, even after work hours, ready to attend to the employer's requests at any time. Claudia even suggested Lara stay in uniform as much as possible and keep it near her bed to quickly dress if needed. Lara knew it wasn't right, but felt she had no choice but to accept the conditions since she had nowhere else to go. The employer also advised Lara to avoid going out on her day off. It wasn't prohibited, but the house had strict hours and she could be locked out if she returned late. Additionally, Lara could be requested by the employers even on her day off, as there were often parties and receptions at the house. However, if not needed, Lara was to stay in her room with the door closed. Lara was entitled to 3 meals with the other staff and was instructed never to take anything from the family's fridge without permission. Furthermore, Claudia recommended Lara always be available to her daughter Daniela, a delicate young woman who often needed assistance. As Claudia left the room, Lara noticed a family portrait on the wall. In the photo were Claudia, a very beautiful woman who was likely Daniela, and a man who seemed familiar to Lara for a moment. But she quickly snapped back to reality and began her work. As Lara climbed onto a chair to clean the top of a china cabinet, she was startled by a shout directed at her. Turning around, she saw a well-dressed girl her age asking if she was deaf or dumb. Lara quickly realized it was Daniela and that her right ear had failed her, preventing her from hearing Daniela's approaching steps. Perhaps due to nervousness on her first day, Lara was having trouble fully hearing what Claudia had said earlier, so she had to rely on lip reading. Despite losing her balance and nearly falling off the chair, Lara managed to prevent the items on the china cabinet from hitting the ground. If the elegant glasses and plates had broken, she knew she would have to work for that family without pay for the rest of her life. Daniela watched maliciously as Lara fell to the ground and laughed at seeing the young woman hurt herself in the fall. Despite her injuries, Lara felt immense relief that no objects had broken. She timidly apologized to Daniela for the incident. The daughter of the homeowners knew none of the staff would dare to respond rudely to her, and Daniela enjoyed humiliating the employees. When she noticed Lara struggling to get up, possibly due to a twisted ankle, Daniela couldn't help herself and ordered the young woman to stop slacking off. She questioned how long Lara intended to continue writhing on the floor. Despite the intense pain and worsening dizziness from the fall, Lara decided to show strength and stood up. She knew her hearing problem had likely worsened due to the accident, but she couldn't let the employers find out, as it could cost her job and, consequently, her housing. Daniela was slightly frustrated to see Lara get up and decided to continue trying to unsettle the new employee. She asked why Lara took so long to respond when she entered the room. Afraid of revealing her hearing difficulty, Lara apologized and explained that she was focused on cleaning the china cabinet. Although determined to continue tormenting the employee, Daniela chose to wait for another opportunity. She knew her father would soon be home and was already annoyed with her previous behavior in the dining room. Before leaving the room, Daniela simply warned Lara that if she wanted to keep her job, she shouldn't tell her parents she had fallen off the chair. Lara continued with her work, facing significant challenges due to intense pain in her ankle and ear. At night, Lara assisted Fatima in serving the table and finally met Nelson, Daniela's father. The man, around 50 years old, also looked curiously at the new employee. There was something about that girl that reminded him of someone, but he couldn't identify who. Nelson felt she evoked memories of his youth, reminding him of someone he hadn't seen in about 20 years. He recognized that he hadn't treated that person correctly, despite still deeply loving her to this day. Nelson regretted fleeing from a serious commitment back when she was expecting them to marry. The irony of the situation was that he ended up marrying Claudia a few months later. Although Claudia came from a good family and was very beautiful, she was never who Nelson truly desired. The couple had Daniela, and despite his displeasure with his daughter's spoiled behavior, Nelson sometimes wondered if things could have been different if he had chosen to marry Annette. During dinner, Nelson couldn't help but notice that the new maid was having difficulty walking and that Daniela made her wander aimlessly around the large dining room. As a doctor, Nelson also noticed that Lara seemed a bit disoriented, more than just nervous. He decided he would discreetly investigate what might be wrong with her, without his wife and daughter knowing. The next day, he would arrive early without notice and take the opportunity to give the maid a free consultation. By the end of that night, Lara was exhausted and in a lot of pain. She just wanted to lie down in her bed and sleep. Lara settled as best as she could in her small bed and closed the door. When she finally fell asleep, she was awakened by insistent knocks on her door. Startled, she got up and opened the door to find Daniela outside. The young woman asked why Lara took so long to open. Still sleepy and disoriented, Lara asked how she could help. Daniela said she wanted hot chocolate and it was Lara's obligation to get up and prepare it. Under Daniela's demands, Lara only managed to tie her apron over her pajamas. She didn't have time to put on the full uniform. In the kitchen, she prepared the demanded hot chocolate. Daniela took only a sip, complaining that Lara took so long that her desire had passed. After that, Daniela left the kitchen. All this work and hassle just so the spoiled daughter of the homeowners could take a sip of chocolate, thought Lara. She then washed and put away the used dishes and returned to her room, where she still had a few hours left to sleep. Lara took the opportunity to apply a compress to her ankle, which was even more swollen. All Lara could think was that the price of having a roof over her head was high, and she needed to stay strong. With no money to consult a doctor to address the swelling, she resigned herself to her situation. The next day, Claudia summoned Lara and informed her that her task would be to clean the china cabinet again. What Lara didn't know was that this request was made solely to please Daniela. The young mistress picked on everyone, but she had an even stronger aversion towards Lara. She couldn't understand why, but from the very first moment, she loathed that girl. Lara was on a chair, cleaning the china cabinet, when Daniela, for amusement, quietly entered the dining room. Without Lara noticing, Daniela pulled the chair, causing the maid to lose her balance. This time, Lara fell, and some of the china from the cabinet broke on the floor. Despite all her self-control, Lara couldn't hold back her tears, desperate over the expensive items that were broken. Claudia soon arrived and, upon seeing the scene, immediately realized that Daniela was responsible. She never imagined her daughter could be so cruel to the maid. However, with no other options, her daughter's only amusement seemed to be humiliating the servants. Even though she knew Daniela hadn't done anything wrong, Claudia started yelling at her, accusing her of being a terrible maid and demanding that she pay for all the damage caused. As Lara apologized and cried, begging not to be fired, Fatima arrived and tried to defend her. But Claudia was adamant. She even questioned the housekeeper about why she had hired Lara, the least experienced candidate among all the applicants. Fatima was extremely surprised by the question, as she didn't expect the mistress to be informed about domestic matters. Claudia then clarified that she had reviewed the candidates' files and noticed that Lara was the only one without experience, to avoid problems. Fatima replied that none of the other candidates would accept living under the conditions that Lara had accepted. The mistress remained silent for a few moments and then turned to Lara again with great anger, ordering her to get up and leave. Lara went to her room, struggling to change clothes and pack her few belongings into a bag. Upon arriving there, she was surprised by Nelson, who had come home early and saw what his daughter had done. Unsure of how to react, he went after Lara to offer her a medical consultation for her ankle and a letter of recommendation. The young woman thanked him but said she would only accept the recommendation letter from that family. When he opened the door to the room, Nelson was shocked to see a photo taped to the wall. He asked Lara who the woman in the photograph was. The young woman replied that it was Annette, her mother. The man then asked how old Lara was, what had happened to her mother, and if she had known her father. Still not understanding, Lara answered his questions and noticed a great sadness in the man upon hearing that Annette had passed away. Suddenly, Lara stopped packing her clothes in the bag and pulled out from between the pages of a book a photo of a young, smiling man. Looking at the photo and then at Nelson, she had no doubts. They were the same person. But how was that possible? It was a photo of her father, who had died when he was young. Realizing that this honest and suffering young woman was his daughter, Nelson had no doubts about what he should do. This situation was a sign that he needed to change his life and save his two daughters. Nelson hugged Lara tightly and led her to the dining room, where Claudia and Daniela were amused by all the drama with the maid. Upon entering the room with Lara, Nelson looked directly at his wife and daughter. Both were startled and questioned why he was holding hands with the maid. Firmly, Nelson explained to Daniela that he knew what she had done because he saw it with his own eyes. She pulled the chair and caused Lara to fall. He also said he saw that Claudia helped Daniela and expressed deep shame. Daniela exclaimed that her father couldn't be serious. All this scene because of a mere maid. She insisted that Fatima had interviewed several candidates and would soon find a replacement. Nelson stated that firstly, no household staff member should be mistreated, and secondly, Lara was not just a maid. He then revealed to his family that they were standing before his eldest daughter. Daniela was in shock and argued that this must be a fabrication by her father to torture her. Nelson then showed the photo that Lara had of him when he was young and mentioned her striking resemblance to Annette, the only woman he had truly loved. Claudia threatened to start screaming, but was interrupted when Nelson declared that he knew she never truly loved him and that now was the right time to announce their divorce. He acknowledged that they had not been a good couple, let alone good parents to Daniela. Nelson said he understood that Daniela needed to improve as a person. From that day forward, she would no longer live in their home, would receive some money to rent a small apartment, but would need to start working to support herself. He emphasized that his duty as a father was to educate her to become a person of value, just as her sister already was. Daniela did not take the news well and expressed her discontent, repeatedly saying how much she hated Lara and that she would never accept being a maid sister. Ignoring his daughter's screams, Nelson stated that Lara would now live in that house with him, have the opportunity to study, and access to the best doctors to address any health issues that arose. Over the following months, father and daughter grew closer and built a beautiful relationship. Lara forgave Nelson's weakness for leaving her mother. He hadn't known about the pregnancy and made a hasty decision. Annette, trying to protect her daughter, had told Lara that he had passed away. Lara sincerely forgave both her father and her mother. Daniela began working as a receptionist for a doctor friend of her father's, and occasionally ran into her sister at the office. Lara visited there to see the specialist, and her ear problem was completely resolved. This gave Lara hope that one day she and Daniela could have a good relationship. Even in the face of great difficulties, Lara always remained calm and never gave up, knowing that things could completely change course at any moment. In extreme situations, she learned to take deep breaths and face challenges with determination. I hope you enjoyed this touching story full of surprises. If you liked it and want more narratives like this, don't forget to like and subscribe to the Enchanting Tales channel. Each story is a new adventure that takes us to unexpected places. Also, leave your comments on what you thought of the story and share your suggestions for future narratives. Until next time,